Welcome to our podcast, Hands Up If You're Human. This is a podcast dedicated to creating lives of fulfillment, meaning, and joy by exploring what it means to be all that we are. From our innate gifts and the things we've been taught to think of our flaws, to our deepest desires and needs that we're ashamed for, we want to explore all the complexities that come as a package deal simply by being human. Recognizing and accepting all of our true selves empowers us to authentically show up in all aspects of our lives, and the world needs more acceptance and authenticity than ever. Hello, Wyndham.
Hello, Lisa. How are you?
Yeah, I'm all right. I'm okay. Been a bit of a discombobulated week, but it's Friday. So
It
for
is
us,
Friday. Yeah. And what's been the cause of your discombobulation? Great word.
Lots of shifts and change to my very relaxed routine of a week. My routine seems to be constantly changing. And I think that although I think routine is really healthy, I also think flexibility is really healthy. I think I've been a bit too flexible. And actually it's just left me like I feel like I didn't know my ass from my elbow most of the days. Nearly the end of term. So any parents out there know that there's extra bits that you've got to remember and do and navigate. And hubby's been away, so again that's just a different schedule, different routine. And then lots of people cancelling, and lots of cancellations is great. I see cancellations as a positive most of the time these days, because I've got if you cancel I still get paid, so in terms of financially I'm okay. But rather than enjoying the space that then's been created, I haven't been able to focus my mind. So it's left me feeling like really disappointed that I haven't been as productive as I could be with that space.
Like empty time rather than free time.
Yeah. Or enjoyment time. It felt like it was just a waste.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah. So that's been my week. But it's really, in the grand scale of life, it really isn't, as my teenagers would say, deep. It's not that deep.
You might be thinking too much about this one. I'm not sure, but I'll let it go.
Yeah.
So what are we talking about today?
Right. So we were saying how we don't want to make the title boring because we want people to listen. We're talking about communication. So we're pondering on the title, are we talking or are we communicating? And I think we've decided that because it's such, again, a huge topic, that we're really looking at how we communicate with people close to us, family members, partners, friends, and why it's a really big, important thing. And actually how we communicate has a huge impact on so many aspects of our lives. So it's quite important.
Yeah, topic. Definitely. It's interesting. I was talking to Louisa about it ahead of time. And obviously she's the most important person in my world. And we've been married for nearly 18 years. And there've been distinct periods of time when I've thought different things about how we communicate. But she came up with the idea that actually we've spent a lot of time talking, but it's relatively recent that we've really started communicating. So yeah, I think it's a super important one. And you're right, it's such a massive piece that so much of communication is non-verbal, but we're not experts in that. So much of communication is kind of drilled into us, or it's societal, or it's everybody understands their cues, and that's something I think we will get into, because I think that is a really important thing to recognize in these important relationships in our lives. But yeah, I think we're looking to keep it to, we may be talking, but are we really communicating, and the problems that can bring up, and and why it's so difficult to genuinely communicate.
Well, we even straight away, if we have a little kind of chat before we start recording, and even then I wasn't on the same page as you, and then I reiterated it back, and you were like, well, that's what I meant. There you go. There's like an example of I know what I'm saying, but that actually wasn't conveyed to you clearly enough.
Absolutely. And I think it's a really, everything in this is going to be important. So my apologies for the repetition of the language I use, but that is such a key part to this whole conversation, I think, is that the language we use, I think in general, there is an assumption that the person listening to it is going to understand exactly what we mean by it, because it's not dramatic language, it's not arcane language. I think I said just the really close, intimate relationships. And what I meant by that was the important relationships in our life. So it could be a partner, could be a child, could be a sibling, could be a parent, could be a best friend, could be that kind of inner circle of relationships. That's what I meant. But obviously that language has come from my intention, through my understanding of language, my experience with language, out into the world for you to understand, but it's come through your own lenses of experience, understanding, use of language, and has landed differently to how I intended. And that is happening all of the time, because all of our understandings and personal relationships with the language we use is different.
Yeah, because the word intimate to me means physically
naked,
intimate.
Doesn't it?
Yeah. It does. Kind of.
Yeah, but I think it does to most people. And it would have to me, how many years ago, it definitely would have meant naked to me a few years ago. And now it doesn't. Intimacy is a much broader, like love. I think we're brought up to view the word love in a really restrictive way. So we can have love for our family. That's a certain kind of love. And then we can have love for the people we're intimate with. But there's a finite amount of it. And therefore, if I give love here, then I probably need to take love away from this place. And it's this really, I think, restrictive notion of the word love. And all the work I've done in yoga and, conversations with people who are further along that journey, like yourself, well, no, the very heart of us is love, not biased or colored by jealousy or possessiveness or anything like that. It's just our natural state. So you can have love for everybody.
It's pure. It's a purity, isn't it?
Exactly that. So that I think has led to the broadening of my understanding of the word intimate as well. But it's taken me 3 minutes to explain that to you.
Yeah.
So the thing that pops into our head is our relationship with the words that we're hearing.
Yeah.
Not the intention of the person who is speaking them.
And amazing where your imagination go, like the importance of imagination with that. So I mean, that just brings me, because you brought up yoga there, like when at the ashram we used to do a yoga called hidden language, and it was quite profound actually. And it's I mean, I've never done it outside of the ashram setting, but you would do, say, for example, let's keep it really simple, tree pose. And then they would ask us to have a journal with us, and then they would do the tree pose, and then we'd have to, like, our subconscious mind, basically, they're trying to get you out of the thinking mind. You'd then explain what your tree looked like, and then it would be like, okay, what do you need to nourish yourself right now? For one, people have a different understanding of nourishment, and also everyone's nourishment, what they need at that time, is going to be different. So then you would have that question, and you would do the tree, and then you would get your journal out and you would write down your interpretation. And it went on and on like this for quite a while, like it's a full good hour and a half. And then we'd all get together in a circle afterwards, and we'd share our tree. We'd share what we got from that question, and what they used to call it a hidden language, like what was more than the thinking mind coming up with this. But so fascinating. So of course, like you think of tree, you think, oh, everyone's thinking the same tree. Of course they're not, again, like I said, nourishment, what's the nut? Well, again, we would describe that differently from person to person. So in everyday language, in everyday communication, that's happening all the time. Then you put emotions into it. So let's get to, like, actually, like, how is it negative? Like, not negative. Go on. I can see.
No. I was just going to say on your example of everybody do tree pose and then think of the tree and then all that kind of stuff. My brother and I are on the faculty for a mediation teaching school. And he does a piece whenever he's teaching that is exactly that. So if you will indulge me a little bit, can I do the piece that, or my version of the piece that he does?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so what I would like you to do is visualize whatever comes to your mind when I say the next thing, and then let me know what it is you're seeing. Okay. Okay. And everybody listening, please do the same. I am thinking of a woman approaching a bank. What are you seeing, Lisa, when I say that?
Weirdly, I'm seeing like someone looking similar to my mother-in-law going to the bank because they don't know how to use online banking, so they've got to go into the physical bank.
Okay, interesting. And I would like everybody listening just to give themselves a moment to like really see what it is that those words have conjured. Because what I'm thinking of is a woman called Helen Glover, who was a rower, and she won an Olympic gold medal. I think she's won multiple Olympic gold medals, but in 2012, she won the gold medal on the home Olympics. And I am seeing her at the end of the race, gently maneuvering her boat towards the edge of a lake, because she needs to get out of her boat onto the bank of the lake.
Wow. There you go.
So vastly different with exactly the same words.
Mm.
And that's what we're dealing with all of the time.
Well, and understandably why, therefore, relationships, any kind of relationship has breakdown, like because of it. I think it's one of the main reasons for divorce. When if your relation counselors start to sit down, it's like, you don't know how to communicate with each other. How do you communicate? Different communication skills. I mean, there's obviously the love languages as well when it comes to romantic relationships. Like, that in itself is a whole topic, like how someone feels that love is either act of service, isn't it, or they want affection or time. There's an array of them, and I think that it causes the most conflict. It's definitely caused the most conflict in my life, is especially in my more intimate relationships, and I mean that by like my partners.
Yeah.
Because it's not that anyone's wrong, it's not because anyone's better than each other, just you're not on the same page because you don't understand what each other are saying.
Yeah. Okay, so are you willing to share an experience of that? Because I think what we've kind of covered is we're speaking different languages, using the same word but different meanings. There's a lot of assumption going on, so we're filling in the blanks, and there's a lot of emotion going on.
Yeah.
And I think it's possible to track it back even further as to what influences a lot of this. But if you're happy to, it's probably easier to deal with real experiences or illustrate with real experiences.
Yeah. Okay. So
I'm happy to do one as well. So
yeah. Okay.
I'm not going to hang you out to dry.
Well, why don't you, if you've got one that you already know, why don't you go first, and then that gives me some time to think of a tangible
Okay.
one.
So again, I was talking to Louisa this morning, and so we've been, like I said earlier, we've been married nearly 18 years. We've been together 20 plus. I probably ought to know that number, but I don't. It's a long time. And for the first kind of, I don't know, third of our relationship, I thought we communicated well. And then I had the realization or the thought that actually it isn't that we communicate well, it's that I communicate well. And then I realized that actually neither of us are communicating well. And then in the last kind of third of our relationship, we are both beginning to communicate. And the reason I kind of frame it that way is because I was always the one who would ask Louisa, what's wrong? You know, when you can feel the energy in a room is a bit weird. I would always be, neither of us would ever offer, look, this is what I'm feeling, this is how I'm thinking. proving to be a bit of a challenge for me, I would always be the one who said, okay, I can tell something is wrong. I'm not clairvoyant. You're going to have to tell me what it is. And I was always in solution mode. So it was never about just clear communication. It was always about, well, what then can I do to fix this? Because I'm feeling uncomfortable in this environment. And my deepest fear is that it's about me. I'm the problem.
Mm.
And then I got to a point where I was looking at all of the things I thought I believed and all of the things I believed to be true, and I was miserable, and I knew I needed to approach things in a different way. And that meant looking at everything I thought I believed. And I ended up in a situation where I was challenging everything, including, do I believe in marriage? Now, I could have shared that with Louisa at the time and said, oh, this is what I'm dealing with at the moment. I chose not to.
Wise.
And at the end of all of that self-reflection and all those kind of things, I got to a place where it was like, okay, I might not technically believe in the institution of marriage. I definitely believe in my relationship with my wife. And I could share that with her. And she was like going, exactly what you just said. She said, thank you for not sharing the workings with me, because that would have been hideous. And so we've kind of traced this arc of neither of us communicating, one of us thinking they were great at communication because I would step in and try to diffuse problems, to them both being in a situation where we are communicating. It's not a specific example, but it's like a trajectory of it. And I think what it has helped me understand is, what is communication? What's the point of it? What are we trying to do? And I've got to a point, and I think understanding that is key to why it's so difficult. Because for me, communication is about being understood. Right?
And heard.
100%. And actually heard for who we are. And I think, we've spoken about this before, but I think there are 5 things we all really want in our lives, and they're close to needs, but we don't want to be millionaires. We don't want to be CEOs. Those are just mechanisms. What we want, there are 5 of them. We want to be seen for who we really are. We want to be heard for who we are. We want to be accepted for who we are. We want to be loved, and we want to be safe. Now, safety splits into a number of different things, but one of those areas of safety is, I want to know that I can share who I am, what my fears are, what my vulnerabilities are, and know that it's a safe environment for me to do so. I won't be judged. I won't be kicked out, that it is safe for me to do so. So I've got to a point with Louisa now where I'm much better at sharing all those deep vulnerabilities, as opposed to sharing the problem, the straw that breaks the camel's back, the situation that I'm in that is like, well, if you hadn't done this, then I wouldn't have had to do that. I'm now in a place where I can identify, well, actually, I'm feeling deeply vulnerable because I'm afraid of failure. And I'm in a situation in front of the most important person in my life where I think I'm going to fuck this up. And I'm terrified of that. And I'm terrified that you are going to judge me for that. And I'm not, it's going to change how you see me. That's a rambling, not a single experience, but it's kind of my journey to, well, what are we trying to communicate really?
Yeah. And that's interesting, because I've been with my husband for 11 years, and our communication skills are completely different. I'm a chatterbox. He is quite reserved. So he can quite often go into mute mode rather than communicating, which means that I can go on it will make me go the absolute opposite. And there's time when you're just saying about like being seen, is he's learned now, although I don't do it as often, is I'll go off on one. I'm trying to communicate because I'm getting nothing back, getting no responses because he's being like totally and utterly like he's not really listening. But there's some wisdom in that to a certain extent, because he's waiting for me to get to the final bit and realizes everything I've said is actually a pile of shit, because actually it's really emotional. It's actually, there's an emotion that I'm going through, and I'm talking my way through it rather than feeling my way through it. And in that, I've created a drama, for example, that really isn't it. So I can talk and talk and talk, but actually I'm missing the point of, like you said, where does it come from in the first place? My fear of being, the relationship's going to end, or not feeling valued, or whatever the argument, where it's that one of those arguments would root from. At the same time, it can be an avoidance. So, they'll say silence is powerful, but actually I think it can be quite dangerous as well, in terms of when it's being used to manipulate. And actually it can be quite antagonizing, and actually can create a lot of anxiety for the other person, because there isn't any response, and it can come across as quite
almost an indifference from the other person, that they don't care.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And then the text messaging comes through, then it's text instead. And we had this thing, like our very last time that we were going through, as relationships do, the ups and downs, was like, never ever message each other this kind of serious stuff, because our text messages, it's easy to do, so you don't have to worry about seeing the person's physical facial expressions or their emotional response to it. And therefore you can be like a text warrior, really, can't you? And you can just say whatever you want. And actually, like we're saying, the words aren't that, even when you're meaning them, they might not be, because that person's already emotive. They're seeing it from where they are in that emotion, rather than for what it actually is.
Yeah, it's fascinating stuff, isn't it? Because you've used the example of, you're a bit of a chatterbox and your husband's the silent, kind of brooding type. I'm putting words in your mouth. You did not say that.
I know. We know what you mean.
But do we?
That's it, yes.
So the silent type. And I think there's that classic "Men are from Mars, women are from Venus," the book. We have fundamentally different styles, and whether that is as a result of the conditioning women have in society and the conditioning men have in society, whether that is innate to us, I don't know. But that whole why are men silent? Because men are silent, nobody is filling in that from a perspective of truth. So we sit there when people are silent with us and go, well, you're not telling me why you're being this way, so I'm going to fill in why this is happening. And you end up in those situations where the person who is receiving the silence, it's so difficult to view that from a heartfelt, open, truly non-judgmental, loving place, even with the people we love, because there's all this emotion swirling around. And so we end up in this situation. You use the word, it can be avoidance, and it can be dangerous, especially when it becomes manipulative. And I wonder how often it genuinely is intended to be manipulative.
I know. So that's really interesting, because I was thinking even earlier today, Paul didn't respond to my message. He's been away and he's arrived back. And I went straight into being triggered. Like, why are you ignoring me? Like, what? Because my last text message to him was a little bit frustrating, because he's changed his plans. And as I say, my week's just been a constant change of plans. And so I actually read my message back going, oh yeah, that one, like, particularly a loving message from me. It was just stating the fact that this is my schedule and I'm not going to be around so much today. It means you're coming back a day early. So I went into overdrive going, oh, he's ignoring me. He's doing what he used to do. And actually, he was on the phone to colleagues because he's got to still work. It's like, so the phone was ringing, but it wasn't. But interestingly, that you're right. How many times is it actually they're doing it on purpose, and being manipulative, or over, like, no, they genuinely, or the wise part of, like, I'm not engaging with this right now because what you're saying is actually not making any sense, or I know that you're emotionally driven with this conversation, so it's going to be ridiculous to have this right now. Do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah. And it might not be a wisdom driven silence. It might
No,
be a
just
fear-driven silence
yes.
that is, holy shit, I think this is going to escalate
Yeah.
because I know what I want to respond.
But you
But do we
said,
have the self-awareness to go, but I'm responding from an emotionally triggered perspective based on a story I am telling myself because I don't have all the information. I mean, if we have that self-awareness and that reflection practice, then silence is coming from a place of wisdom.
mm,
But if we don't, then it's coming from a place of fear that says, I I do not want this fight. I'm going to avoid it.
but isn't it interesting? Because, well, there's two, my head's going right now, but two things with that is how silence can create tension. So I then have the tension and my body responds to that silence in a negative way. Just like if I get a lovely message or I get someone tells me they love me verbally, not through a message, how my body just, oh, that's lovely, how it responds to it, and how quickly you can get either an email, a text, or someone say something to you that takes you into fight, flight, freeze, basically. Like the body just
Yeah.
goes, oh, and every cell of your being is responding to that negativity.
Yeah.
I quite often talk about in class about, like, we're made up of 80% water. And as we all know, so of course we are impacted. And I always talk about moons and whatever. And the reason I'm saying this is that some of you may have heard of a guy called Emoto, and he did an experiment where he meditated with water and basically meditated with love and compassion. And they then looked at it through a microscope, and beautiful crystal, a beautiful kind of picture crystal. It like looked like a bit like a snowflake, lots of like, and then did it on hatred and anger.
Mm.
And it was distorted and it was like all over the place. And you can do it with like actually water in your house. You can do the same exercise. You could go and pray and meditate in one room, same conditions, same but a different room, but same conditions, exactly the same temperature, all of that, and go in there when you've had an argument and shout and scream. That water will be black, and the one that you meditated is white. So if we're made up of all of that, whatever people are saying to us, whatever's going, we are absorbing, like through communication, is going to impact our physical cellular level, on a cellular level.
And interestingly, it isn't just what we're having said to us, it's what
No,
we are saying to ourselves.
100%.
Because I mean, I remember for years I had I was one of my areas of genius was I could take myself from neutral to fucking ragingly angry, click of fingers. And I got to a point where I could see it happening and didn't know how to stop it. And I would just get into this spiral of negative thinking that would engender this fierce rage and at nothing, at nobody, at the story I was telling myself. And I think what we're landing on is this is the central problem in communication.
Mm.
It's actually us.
It is. And it's that whole listening to that inner voice, or listening to the wise one within.
Yeah.
So I talk about this a lot in yoga and meditation, and it's, the thinking mind is there for a reason, but it's words, right? It's words ultimately, and the imagination, obviously you color it in with images and stuff, but ultimately we're having an internal dialogue with ourselves all the time. And is that the idea is to, like you said, rather than getting, I could do the same. Like actually earlier when I was saying about that example with Paul, like he didn't respond to me. I put these headphones on. I could feel my heart beating, my anxiety, because it's like I'm emotionally getting like affected by it. Yeah, that's because I'm tired this week. But if I'd just done a yoga practice and I just meditated, I don't think I'd have responded that way. I'd been like, okay, no, there's a completely rational reason. I don't need to have that dialogue in my head. I'm coming from a compassionate place within myself because I am closer to me rather than my ego.
Yeah. Interesting. Which brings us to another really interesting point, because if we recognize that communication with important people in our lives is difficult. We recognize that there's a whole lot of emotion rolling around. We recognize we're using language that other people have a different relationship and meaning with. We recognize that lack of communication, or a lot of our communication, can be fear driven because of the stories we tell ourselves. Why are we at that point where we're telling ourselves all these? I mean, this is fundamental of human beings, but I think it's really important because I think there's a, I said the 5 things we want. We want to be safe. We want to feel safe. And our vulnerability is a big, we don't like to share vulnerability. So why, with the most important people in our lives, whether they be parents, siblings, partners, children, best friends, do we feel that vulnerability in sharing who we are, in sharing what we feel, sharing what we need?
Well, it's being rejected, isn't it? Or like you're going to lose them in some way. And actually, quite often, the more that you're honest and real and authentic, which is all this podcast is about, is it gives permission to those people to go, I feel the same. I have the same thing that go on. And I think women, like you said, the difference between men and women, we do recognize this more because we do talk in groups of women more. But even within that, it can be clipped and you can morph yourself to talk or hold back. But I think that the safe space thing is the key to all of it. Like if you feel safe, then, for example, my husband will recognize the difference of me being upset about something totally different that isn't related to us, but I've created it about us, and I'm saying all these horrible things and stuff that's coming out of my mouth that I don't really mean, and going, it's okay. I understand what, she's gone through something right now, like, and that's not what this is about. That's when you feel safe. That's when you know you're in the right place. But I say it's the right place, that you are being held in some way in an energetic kind of love bubble, if that makes it sense. I think that happens very rarely. I think, in friendships as well, I've had friends for life, but some people, I mean, I'm quite an open book, as you might all know. So I'm not full of fear of sharing quite a bit, but there are times that I do adapt and I change. And sometimes it's because it's needed. You don't need to be like that all the time. But I think a lot of people don't have that. And I think that I know for me as and doing private sessions and coaching and my healing and whatever we want to call what I do, because I think I do a mix of yoga, coaching and healing, and I mean hands-on healing at that point, is why it is so cathartic for the students and clients that come. This morning I had a client or a student, and she said, I just feel so, she actually said that, I just feel like so at ease with you. Like I felt, like she said last week, I felt so much lighter when I left. She said, I just because she cried, haven't seen her for years, like let it all out.
What did you do?
If people don't cry, I've done something wrong. That's why I always say it doesn't always work like that. But it is about that, going, oh, this person's not judging me. They're allowing me to be, and they're listening to me, fully listening to me, not colouring it in, not filling in the pictures. And even if the words that they're saying aren't what we're not dictionarily, like if we got a dictionary, we would write the same definition out. It's a sense of safety.
And that's really interesting as well, isn't it? Because if you're in that kind of environment, then you're attuned to assume the best of what is being said, because it's a love-filled, wonderfully held, positively vibrant and energetic space. Therefore, your mind is not telling you they meant that by this and you should be annoyed or offended, or it's like, actually, I'm just automatically taking on board the best possible version of what you've just said. Whereas when we're not in those spaces, our ego and our mind doesn't do that. It goes to protection mode, and protection mode is, I'm going to shut this down. That person thinks I'm terrible. You need to go on the attack, or you need to go super defensive, whatever it might be. It's such a painful reality to have to deal with, because it causes incalculable amounts of suffering, but it fundamentally it's self-generated.
And also, as you're saying that, like, and again, you refer to men and women communicating differently, which that we definitely do. But I'm looking at my stepchildren, and one of them does similar to her dad, like, and that's her personality. So
Yeah.
again, it's personality, because not everybody's going to communicate in that way. They communicate through different ways,
Mm.
and also from the blueprint, from
Yeah.
learning from what they've seen and been brought up like. And I want to touch on that about being a step parent, because if people are listening with this might be helpful, because I didn't realize this is what we were doing. And actually, there's a book on it, which I was like, oh, that kind of like affirms
I had
that,
to work that out.
to
I
really
could
work
have
that
just
out for
read it.
years. But in our house, it's always been that, Paul will be the person that will, if something needs to change or there's some kind of conflict, then he's going to be the one that's going to address the problem.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm the one that then coaches, well, can you understand why dad is upset with that and the implications of that? So I'm emotionally detached, even though I'm the one probably most affected by it, that said to Paul, this needs to be sorted out. Like, I cannot cope. I mean, it was really hard for me, because where I'm naturally just want to go in and talk it through, I want to sit down, I want to get to the root cause, and I've always been like that, to the point where it can be too much. Doesn't need to be that way. That actually I'm the coach, and on that, and ironically now I've trained as a coach, but the step parent is the coach, and the parent is the parent. The
Mm.
actual biological parent is the going to be that, and that's how I mean, I'm sure that doesn't happen in everyone's blended families, but it's definitely helped me understand that, and it gives me time to get out of my emotional state from it, then see things for factually as they are, and then have a clear communication about what's going on, and then using, your dad used it from an emotive place because of blah 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 blah, can you see it from his point of view? And it's been a real brilliant, like, way of approaching step parenting, and because my stepdaughter doesn't talk, so it's the same thing. I've had to learn, she's the opposite of me, like Paul's the opposite of me. So how
Mm.
can we have a genuine conversation, and not a forced conversation, or a just let's keep it surface level, because it's just easier that way, not go deep in anything.
Yeah.
And that's because they don't feel safe, so until she feels safe and secure, and she understands that you actually want the best for her, and for my stepson too, then of course they're not going to open up.
Yeah. It's interesting. I come from a blended family as well, and I don't think, well, that wasn't that kind of the step parent being the coach was not the model in the house when we grew up. And there's no judgment on that. It just worked differently. It was still very much um the biological parent was the had to face the issues that came up, was the disciplinarian, was the whatever else. But it wasn't so much that the other parent was able to, okay, can we build bridges here and can we build understanding? Um, it would have been interesting if that were the case.
Mm.
Yeah, interesting. I wonder. Sorry, go on.
Well, so then it always makes me wonder then, like, if you know Paul was just a single parent and never found another relationship, like how much my stepchildren would then think that actually the best way to approach anything is just like keep quiet, don't say anything, let's just crack on with it, and become very internalized.
Mm.
However, then you've got someone else who's like wears a heart on her sleeves, like wants to get to the root cause of everything, and how that helps them be a bit more rounded with their communication skills. And
Yeah,
why I'm saying that is because I just don't think what you said is particularly men and women. I know we always generalize, like I do think it is a personality as well as upbringing.
yeah,
um
yeah. And actually, that safety. So I think there are a couple of things that massively influence why we are as typically as bad at genuine communication as we are. And I think if you think of those close partner relationships, so the classic definition of intimate, the naked relationships, you know, if I think when Louisa and I met, I didn't know who I was when we met.
Yeah.
I didn't have a clue. I was lost, completely lost. I didn't realize how lost I was when we met, but I was lost. I had allowed fear unknowingly to compromise who I was. I had created an internal environment that was absolutely looking to protect me at every stage. And that massively compromised what I was willing to share. It had disconnected me from my deepest desires and needs. So I'm coming into a relationship with somebody with all of that going on internally that I'm not aware of. Add to that I'm on my best behavior. I am trying to be the most charming. I'm trying to be the funniest. I'm trying to shield people from my moods, from the fact that this turmoil and dissonance is going on inside me. So she falls in love with like the best version of me possible at that time. And then I'm in like, well, I've set the boundaries for how this relationship is going to be. Because I've showed up in a certain way, she has accepted that version of me. And it's the same when we go into a job. It is the same when we go into any relationship. That version we project first up, well, that's the version we've committed to being, even though we're not aware that's what we're doing. And then when we shift from that, like the relationship matures and we become more comfortable. And I have this massive pivotal moment in life, 10 years, 20 years after we met, where I go, I don't want to do this anymore. I'm completely lost. I'm adrift. She's there going, what? Who is this person? And no point was her support anything other than 100%. However, I'm now at a point where I can look back and go, I'm the one that changed the dynamic. I'm the one who said, I'm not going to be that version of me anymore. I can't. The uncertainty that generates is like, well, who are you going to be? From both of us, it's like, I don't know who I'm going to end up being. And then we have this whole fear of vulnerability, kind of go, okay, there's all these desires and needs and things and fears and that I'm going to have to find a way to share with you, but I have no idea how this is going to land.
Yeah. And then do you think
idea.
you would clip your communication, or do you go silent while you're reflecting?
100% silent. Historically, I have been I'm going to withdraw and brood and reflect and think and solve. And once I've solved, I will come out of my brooding cave and I'll just carry on like nothing's happened.
Yeah.
But for Louisa, she would have, you know, and especially in the lead up to me leaving my old job and all that kind of stuff, she would have days and days and days of me pretty much depressed, trying to figure stuff out internally that was not about her, but I wasn't filling that blank in for her. So quite naturally at times she was again, I don't know what's going to happen here, but this does not feel good. And then I'd come out of it and she'd be like, what the fuck was that? I go, oh, no, I was just thinking about whether I believed in marriage or not. What? And what did you arrive at? Oh, no, I don't believe in marriage, but I do believe in us. So that's okay. And it'd be like, fucking hell. 5 days of brooding, longer than that, 10 days of brooding on that.
Yeah.
She doesn't get any information for that 10 days. And I didn't feel safe. And not just with that one. I mean, obviously I didn't feel safe in sharing that because I didn't know where I'd end up. But in other things, it would be, I was afraid to say, I don't know who I am. So I didn't communicate that. You know, now I am aware of all those things, and we have had awkward, difficult, uncomfortable conversations where we've laid more of this stuff out for each other, and as a result have come out the other side of those with a new kind of set of boundaries around, not boundaries are the wrong word, a new norm as to how we interact. I'm no longer feeling I have to maintain this version of myself that I used to be, even though that version made me unhappy. I can now be open and clear and kind of go, actually, you know what? Today I'm just feeling this turmoil inside and doubt and self-loathing, and I know it's old pattern, I know it's old blueprint. It's nothing to do with you. And she go, okay, no, I get that. Can I do anything? No, it'll be okay. This will clear. I'm aware of what it is. Whereas before I'd just be moody. She wouldn't have a clue why.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the wisdom, the wise you. That's the experience you. That's the, I've had to feel all of that uncomfortableness and actually go through the conflict in the relationship, the emotional side of it to arrive there. So it's not like avoiding that either. There is a process, but like then you said, now it's like you've updated yourself. So therefore you won't go back to that. You'll recognize it rather than go back to that behavior. So it's a little bit there because actually you still need that time to process before you can articulate properly what's going on.
Yeah.
I used to put myself in hotels. We'd have a fight and I would go in, because I used to be so emotionally driven that it was easy for me to go and basically decompress and regulate my nervous system myself. I didn't realize that's what I was doing. Now I don't need to do that. I do very similar. He understands me enough now to go, you okay? And I just go, and I can find out quite quickly how to say, no, I'm not. And these are the reasons I think is why I don't feel very good right now.
Yeah.
But I mean, oh my God, the amount of nearly breaking up with Don at that point, you know, and I guess sometimes trying to get something when someone's being silent as well, and actually wanting some response, and actually the response is then catastrophic. It's not like, it's like poking a bear, because you're wanting that words to come out of that person's mouth rather than allowing them to do their thing as well.
I mean, that's another really interesting one, is when we communicate with an expectation of response.
Yeah.
And we've defined what the response has to be. We're not genuinely communicating. We're not giving choice to the other person. We're boxing them in without them even knowing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
It was when we moved here, so a couple of years ago, we had I can't remember whether I've told this story before, but we've got an external clothesline screwed to the side of the house. And when we moved in, I have exhibited traits of procrastination quite dramatically. And for some reason, we'd moved in, Louisa said, oh, yeah, that obviously needs to go up at some point, assuming it would be 2, 3, 4 weeks before I got around to doing it. I did it the following day, but I fucked it up. I didn't measure it properly. I put it in too low, so it clashed with the tap. Went to do it again, fucked it up a second time. Finally got it on the wall the third time. Louisa comes downstairs and she says to me, oh, thank you. I wasn't expecting that to go up. And I went, yeah, well, this is what happens when you don't let me procrastinate. And she looked at me stunned. And in that moment, I recognized what was happening. And it was like, and I interrupted that whole thought process. I was so angry with myself that I wanted to blame somebody else. I wanted it to be Louisa's fault. She had nothing to do, absolutely nothing to do with it. But I'd recognized that's what was happening. And I stopped mid-sentence. I could just see the shock on her face beginning to dawn. And I went, oh, sorry, just realized what I've done there. And actually, I'm really annoyed with myself because I didn't just screw it up once, I screwed it up twice. And I have an unhealthy expectation of instant perfection with myself. I feel triggered. I'm going to go and figure out what that means about me. And she just was silent, went, okay, cool. Thanks for putting the clothesline up.
Yeah.
But 5 years ago, it would have it wouldn't have blown up into a big row because we both want to avoid conflict.
Yeah.
But it would have been hideous. I would have had to have apologized because I was obviously in the wrong. But it was, I think it's why I say that most of our communication problem is us, not the other person.
Yes.
And just even if we just go into communicating with that as an idea, that's like, actually, let me get clear on what's mine and let me get clear on what is somebody else's, then it gives us this huge power to completely diffuse what looks like it's only going to go one way. And I've done it in other conversations as well. I've felt myself triggered with people I don't really know. I've started to say something and then I go, oh, hold on, I just felt really triggered there for a minute. I'm really interested in what that means about me, what I can learn about me. So you carry on, but I'm going to go and have a bit of a think. And people think I'm a freaking lunatic, but it's
But
really powerful for me.
yeah. Well, there's that book, isn't there, the Four Agreements, and one of the Four Agreements is be impeccable with your word. Because the power of word, they say sticks and stones may break roads, but words will never hurt me. Bullshit.
Yeah,
They can
absolutely
hurt.
bullshit. Yeah.
They really hurt.
Yeah.
Like we said, on a cellular level, your body changes to it responds to something nice or something that feels fucking horrible being said to you. Go on.
No. I was just going to say, interestingly, how much of a choice do you think you have in that?
Being impeccable with your word, or
No,
what other
with
people say.
how what other people say lands with you.
I think there is well, it is my choice how it
Yeah.
lands with me.
Yeah.
Because you can have the same conversation and I could be in two very different states of mind. And we talked about it the other day when someone said, oh, you look really healthy.
Mm.
And actually, I just took it as, I know lots of women that we do this stupid, but I say stupid, you hate me using the word stupid, but what I mean is like, my response was, oh, put on a bit of weight. That's what they mean.
She means I'm fat.
Yeah, she never said that. I
Yeah.
coloured that in. Now, if I'd just done a workout and I was standing, I wasn't feeling not my best self, and they said that, I'd be like, oh, well, yeah, they can see that I've been working out and like I look really healthy. So the
Yeah.
same words, different state of mind to receive that
Yeah.
information.
And interestingly, if you had been post workout, and I'm one of the very rare vindictive people who wants to make you feel bad. You're just post workout, and I come in and go, you look well.
It won't
Very
bother me.
different. Very
Yeah.
different.
Yeah.
So the intention of the person speaking is way less important than our inner firm ground, our heart space, where we are physically, emotionally, spiritually, mentally. It's way more important where we are than where they are.
Well, and again, I quite often say in class, like with be mindful of your speech, be mindful of your actions, because it all has an effect. So there's a vibration, there's an energetics that happens from that. So in yoga world, they call it Devi of speech. Be every word that comes out to be conscious and thoughtful and kind of. It doesn't mean you have to be nice all the time. I mean, it doesn't. That I think it's two different things. It doesn't mean that you pretend anything different. You're very truthful, but it's coming from a place of compassion and kindness, not vindictive, spiteful, and I want to hurt this person.
Yeah. Which is a really lovely kind of segue almost. I mean, I don't know whether you have anything else you want to talk about regarding experiences and the types of conversations we struggle with, or whether it's a nice link to, well, how do we do this better?
I think that's perfect.
Because the responsibility is on us. Because I can't, if I communicate, if I'm as clear as I feel I can be, my intention is compassionate and love filled, and I'm clear on the outcome I'm trying to achieve, which I think we are so bad at that bit alone, being really clear on what we are trying to achieve. If I do all of that to the best of my ability, I cannot understand it for you.
Yeah.
That's got to sit with you. And if you don't understand it and I feel you're triggered, then I have a choice. Do I match your trigger, or do I go back to, well, I'm being intentional, I'm being compassionate, I'm being love-filled. That, not to say I'm going to tell you stuff you want to hear, but do I match your escalation, or do I stay where I am? Okay, it's not, my intention isn't to hurt you.
Yeah. Well, and how many times do we try and do that because we want it to not feel horrible for that other person because they have responded in the way that you weren't intending. So
Yeah.
you actually then take away the opportunity for their own learning, because you don't, if you're really solid and you're actually and you're very clear with that. And I don't mean, when we say love and compassion, doesn't mean that we're saying, all like, it is literally that you're just being really truthful, and actually that person, you need that person to hear that, or you'd like that person to hear that. And but then if a bit like we said, but if their response isn't what was intended, or like you said, then it's theirs again. We've come across this before in podcasts. Let them own their own stuff. Let them own. It's a bit like when people go on.
No, go on. A bit like when people,
bit like when like you go, what people think of you is not up to you. They're allowed to have their opinion of you.
Yeah.
And it's the other way around. It's like they're allowed to have their response, but when is it that you go, but this isn't anything to do with me? So that's.
I had a friend of mine recently who was really trying to figure out how they were going to maintain or not a relationship with a friend of theirs. And they were struggling because the behaviors of this friend in certain instances, not across the board, but in certain instances, were unacceptable. And then on the other hand, this friend is again, but the teachings of Buddha, and you listen to Ram Dass or any spiritual teacher, is this kind of, at the center of us, there's love for each other. And they were struggling with having these two things in the same moment. And it was like, well, no, I think what that means is the love we have for people is unconditional. We wish them the best. We want the best for them. That does not absolve people from being held accountable for their behaviors.
Definitely.
And you can actually pointing that out, helping people see where their actions or their behaviors or their words are impacting. If it's coming from a place of compassion and love, then it is an act of love. Now, we can't control the outcome, but we can control our intention going into it. It's really difficult.
Really difficult. Really difficult.
Really
great if everyone's doing this. Like I used to find, if an ashram or a yoga retreat, everybody's being reminded of this through, probably more Sanskrit ways, and that much easier. Everyone, okay, I get, but actually in the big wide world, it's really, really hard to do.
The
and I think
reality,
I mean, and again, my language for and what's acceptable language, it's not. And I mean, I'll digress. So I think we're kind of coming to a close, but like my language, like driving a ar and being cut up or whatever, is atrocious.
Are you road ragey?
And my little one, who's 8, will go, mummy swears a lot when she's driving. Okay, then, so yeah. I mean, it all sounds like what we're saying is really easy. I think it's a constant practice.
Yeah.
And it's also being kind about it as well. Going, okay, that's me just being a freaking human being, and I'm really sorry, I'm just screwed up again. I was off whack for whatever reason. I was off whack. The quicker we can compassionate to ourselves, and the quicker then we can move through that again.
Yeah. That's such a powerful thing, though, just even with us, because in order to stand up in front of the person who is important to you, whatever that relationship is, and say, that's on me, I'm really sorry, I behaved in a way I would rather I hadn't. I've got some stuff like clearly going on that I maybe need to work on. It was not my intention to impact you the way I did. I'm going to work hard to not have that happen in the future. That takes a massive act of vulnerability because we're not brought up in a world that says it's okay to be wrong.
No.
We're not. And so we get super defensive when we're called on our own bullshit. We get defensive because it's like, oh my God, this person has seen it. There's part of me that's already aware and afraid of it. They're going to judge me for it.
Yeah.
But start getting to a point where we go, that's interesting.
Yeah.
That's interesting. You've called me out on something. What can I learn in this moment? Okay, interesting. Do I want that to be the impact of my actions on you? Absolutely not.
No.
Okay, so you've got some work to do as to how this lands with you. But equally, I have work to do, because if it isn't my intention and that is the outcome I'm helping to create, can I do something different that does more closely align with the outcome I'm trying to create and the intention I come into this conversation, relationship, what it might be with? What can I do that moves this forward? Recognizing I can't do everything, recognizing it might not work, recognizing that this may never be resolved, but can I do something to help it? Can I own what's mine?
Yeah, definitely.
So we fixed communication, right?
That's it. You're all going to be great communicators. We want to hear from you. We want to know how this lands, and and if you can implement any of this wisdom that we so clearly feel like we've mastered.
It is interesting as well, isn't it? Because we talk all the time about, or I talk all the time about, we're not trained in our emotions.
Yeah.
And naming how we feel in the moment is enormously powerful. Enormously powerful, because I'm feeling this emotion. I am not this emotion. This emotion is information. What is it telling me?
Yeah.
And if we make it about the emotion and us, then it's very hard to have an argument with somebody who's making it about themselves in that way. I mean, if they're making your life about them, then yeah, that's potentially problematic. But
yeah, really, really great skill, and a constant practice, a daily practice.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I really enjoyed that conversation.
Me too.
I think it was I mean, I think what people might not understand, someone said to me yesterday, God, it must take a lot out of you doing these. I said, no, it really doesn't. Like I said, I feel like we're in a coaching session with each other. And I always come out going, oh wow, like I've just learned something new again, or it's a relearning, or it's a reminder. So I'm just, as you know, I'm just super grateful we're doing these, super grateful for you, and the fact that you are the wordsmith and you do pick up on my words in a great way. You call me out all the time. My shoulds, and that's silly. Is it silly? Should you be doing that? And I think there's a lot of people that say those things quite frequently to, I don't know, take away from judgment, that, worry what that person's judging. Let's soften it. So I know it's my fault. No, like you say as it is, and let's work with that. Don't detract from it.
Yeah, I think a lot of people say those, certainly things like, I know it's silly, or I know I sound silly, or reference themselves as being crazy, or anything like that. It's fear of external judgment, so we preempt the judgment.
Yeah, so you kind of try and stop it in its tracks before.
I think people are trying to say, I know that you're about to think I'm crazy, so I'm going to tell you I think I'm crazy.
Yeah.
It's like, no, please don't do that.
Yeah.
If they think you're crazy, that's on them.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm very grateful that you always support me not feeling crazy. Okay, so we both of us want to say thank you as always for listening to our Hands Up If You're Human podcast. We genuinely love sharing these, and we genuinely want to hear from you. If there's anything that you would like us to talk about and discuss, you don't have to put it on anything on a social media platform. You can confidentially send us an email to handsupifyou'rehuman@gmail.com. Please share, please like, review. It makes a difference. Subscribe. Yeah, sorry, I forget that.
Me too. Yeah.
Yes. well, we love doing these. We'd like to continue doing these and actually do them because they're worth doing, that they're actually landing with you. So yeah, grateful for all our feedback so far. And please do drop us a line if there's anything, like I said, you'd like us to discuss in the future.
Lovely.
Oh, that's it.
That's it.
All right, my darling. Thank you as always.
Thank you. I'll speak to you next time.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye.